The name Hell's Gate was derived from the journal of explorer Simon Fraser, who in 1808 described this narrow passage as a place where no human should venture, for surely these are the gates of hell. Long before the arrival of Simon Fraser, and as early as the end of the last ice age, Hell's Gate was a First Nations congregation ground for settlement and salmon fishing. Archaeological evidence from old occupation sites and isotope analysis of human skeletal remains suggest that settlement and migration patterns for indigenous peoples in the canyon correlated with the seasonal migration patterns of Pacific salmon. During the last deglaciation 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, long tongues of ice formed wedges and dams in the river's basin above the canyon, resulting in the formation of large reservoirs and new lakes, creating optimal spawning grounds for salmon. During this interglacial period, salmon began to populate the Fraser River and used Hell's Gate Passage as their route to upstream spawning grounds. Constricted by two steep subvertical granodiorite walls, the incredibly narrow passage and high water velocity made this part of the upstream journey extraordinarily difficult for salmon, and they would hover along the shores of the river or rest in its back eddies. As a result, Hell's Gate's geology provided the indigenous fishers with superb opportunities to readily catch salmon congregated at the river's edge, attempting to elude the strong currents and rough waters. Hell's Gate became one of the most popular fishing stations along the Fraser River, pre- and post-colonial contact, where large numbers of aboriginal locals, and eventually European settlers, congregated during the summer months to fish for migrating salmon. Standing on adjacent rocks or on specially constructed wooden platforms extending from surrounding cliffs, fishermen would use long dip nets to snatch the salmon. Hell's Gate is an abrupt narrowing of British Columbia's Fraser River, located immediately downstream of Boston Bar in the southern Fraser Canyon. The towering rock walls of the Fraser River plunge toward each other, forcing the waters through a passage only 35 meters, 115 feet, wide. It is also the name of the rural locality at the same location. For centuries, the narrow passage has been a popular fishing ground for aboriginal communities in the area. European settlers also began to congregate there in the summer months to fish. Eventually, the Fraser Canyon became a route used by gold rush miners wishing to access the upper Fraser gold-bearing bars and the upper country beyond up the Fraser and the Thompson. In the 1880s, the Canadian Pacific Railway, CPR, built a transcontinental railroad that passed along the bank at Hell's Gate, and in 1911 the Canadian Northern Railway began constructing a second track. In 1914 a large rock slide triggered by their construction fell into the river at Hell's Gate, obstructing the passage of Pacific salmon needing to swim upstream to spawn. Salmon had difficulty passing through the now swifter water, and were appearing in increased numbers downstream below the Hell's Gate Passage and in tributary rivers and streams that they had not inhabited before. In the winter of 1914 debris removal began, and in 1915 the river was pronounced clear. However, many biologists claim that the river was permanently altered and the salmon migration would forever remain disturbed by the slide. A decrease in Fraser salmon catalyzed tension between the Government of Canada and the Aboriginal peoples of the area. Not only did the debris clearing operation impede their access to the river, but the government imposed new fishing restrictions, such as a 4-day-per-week limit, in an attempt to preserve the salmon population. Ultimately, the slide and subsequent restrictions proved very damaging for the Aboriginal fishing economy. The Canadian and United States governments formed the Pacific Salmon Convention, PSC, of 1937, which created the International Pacific Salmon Fisheries Commission, IPSC, now the Pacific Salmon Commission. The IPSC carried out extensive research, and as based on their findings they recommended that fishways be constructed to help migrating salmon pass through Hell's Gate. Building of the fishways began in 1944. This decision sparked a major controversy in the Pacific fisheries and research community, which became divided along national lines. American William Thompson, head researcher for the IPSC, was criticized by Canadian zoologist William Ricker, who claimed that the IPSC research was unreliable and that fishways were not a means to preserving Fraser salmon. Ricker believed that Hell's Gate posed no threat to migrating salmon, and that commercial overfishing did. He held that stringent regulation should be placed on fishing for Fraser salmon. The fishways at Hell's Gate became a tourist attraction in the 1970s. Among the attractions for tourists are the air tram, food outlets, observation decks and an educational fisheries exhibit. Hell's Gate Air Tram starts at the parking lot of the Trans-Canada Highway and descends to its lower terminal on the opposite side of Fraser River next to the pedestrian suspension bridge, where there is an observation deck, a restaurant, a gift shop and other tourist attractions. It was built in 1970 by the Swiss manufacturer Habiger Engineering Works and opened on July 21, 1971. Its 2 cabins can carry 25 people each, plus the cabin attendant. Each cabin travels up and down along its own track rope at a maximum speed of 5 meters per second, 18 kilometers per hour, 984 feet per minute, over an inclined length of 341 meters, 1,118 feet. The horizontal distance between the terminals is 303 meters, 994 feet, and their difference in altitude is 157 meters, 515 feet. The mean inclination between the terminals is 51%. The track ropes have a diameter of 40 millimeters. The hull rope connecting the two cabins via the drive bull wheel in the upper terminal has a diameter of 19 millimeters and its counter rope 15 millimeters. The track ropes are anchored in the upper terminal and are tensioned by two concrete blocks of 42 tons each suspended inside the lower terminal, where the blocks have a leeway of 7.9 meters to move up and down. The hull rope and its counter rope are tensioned by a counterweight of 3.5 tons, also in the lower terminal. The max output of the motor is 140 horsepower, 104 kilowatts. The total carrying capacity of the aerial tramway is 530 passengers per hour, one way. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. See you.